The storm swirled around her, thunder cracking and breaking across the sky. She headed for the dock, heart pounding in her chest. The wind whipped the trees, making them swirl as if they would be lifted right out of their roots, their branches thrashing to and fro. The rain beat on Julia's head and shoulders as she approached the dock. Magnificent pumpkins rose between the vines and leaves. They were gigantic, enormously round, brilliantly orange, and adorned with shadowy rivets and indentations from top to bottom and on all sides. Hannah's thoughts swirled around what the letter might say, how mysterious her aunt had always been to her. And now this. Julia had disappeared in a storm? Written her a cryptic letter with a plane ticket? Hannah had never been to Maple Hollow, but she felt a strong pull to go there that she couldn't quite put into words. Something was calling her, and she was starting to listen. The chilly air descended on the long road to the airport, which was lined on each side with enormously tall and towering trees, each glowing golden yellow in the midday sun. As she stepped off the bus, Hannah tightened the scarf that was nestled around her neck, its buttery warmth blocking the snappy chill in the air. The leaves crunched beneath her black velvet boots, each resolute step she took unleashing a dusty cloud about her feet. That night had been her parents' anniversary. Her grandmother had come over for dinner and cake, and then her parents had gone out for a nightcap. Her grandmother had stayed to babysit. Hannah had drifted off into a deep sleep after dinner. She hadn't been entirely surprised to be woken by her grandmother that morning, since sometimes she would stay over. Storms in nature aren't always just in nature, she thought. After all, we are all part of nature, and as such, storms are part of us and we them. When winds rise, temperatures swell, and the air fills with change, a storm is afoot. The more dramatic the storm, the more change it brings. The entire manor was surrounded by it. It was the largest pumpkin patch she had ever seen in her life. Her thoughts returned immediately to her recurring dream. Hannah remained at the window, staring out across the patch to the sea. She was meant to be here. She knew it now, in her bones. In October, people in the Northern Hemisphere begin to turn their ears to the wind. Their breath mingles with the leaves that fall crackling to the ground. Their spirits quicken as they feel the shift. Summer has waned and fall is ushering itself in. It is an annual turning of the wheel, a process some dread and some welcome. But there is power in this passage. It is the harvest time. She sat on the piano bench, staring out the window, sometimes closing her eyes. Not playing, just listening. She was listening to the silence between the raindrops, listening to the spirits around her to help her solve this riddle and lead her in the right direction. Clouds raced past the moon as the sky whirled in the stormy night. The library at Skye Manor was built to sit right out on the shore. Bookshelves lined the walls from ceiling to floor, on which there were countless volumes stacked in different directions. The only light in the room came from the fireplace, the glow of the flames still crackling. Hannah preferred animals to people. She loved a good conversation, but that wasn't the point. Conversations didn't always have words, and most people didn't understand that. Or if they did, the conversations were never about the words that were spoken. Energy followed people and surrounded them like light or shadow. It was unavoidable and part of the dance. She didn't always feel like having a dance partner. it creaked and became caught on a rug on the floor. She squeezed past and followed a short hallway that turned sharply to the right. Within moments, she had entered the most fantastical and magical library she had ever seen. On either side, each wall was filled with books. From ceiling to floor were books, every shelf crammed. The bookcases must have each had 8 or more levels. Hannah took a deep breath and savoured the nostalgic scent only aged books can bear, mixed with wax and notes of incense. Hannah awoke the next morning with a start. It was still before dawn, thick overcast skies obscuring the morning light. She thought she heard music, but then figured it must have been part of her dream. It turned out it was midnight. He was making a loud meowing noise and carrying something in his mouth. He dropped a single match at Hannah's feet and flapped his tail proudly, staring into her soul. "Cats are special animals," Morgan began, waving her hands as she spoke. "Spirits, really, who communicate with us outside of our physical senses." Even with the light of the lantern, the stairway was dark and narrow. It spiraled in its descent and seemed to go on forever. Hannah carefully felt for each step, her heart pounding in her chest, her body surging with adrenaline in preparation for the unknown. What lay ahead, what lurked in the darkness, what she could not see. Hannah opened a book. The pages were brittle and worn, as if the book was centuries old. She flipped through the pages, not exactly sure what she was looking for. The book, which seemingly had a life of its own, had flopped open to a page near the middle. It was as if this part had been accessed more than the rest, the spine of the book opening naturally to this section. The sun was setting earlier now that Halloween was getting closer. Long shadows cast themselves across the side streets as she walked along the main drag. The quaint lantern lights lining the sidewalks were flickering on. As she walked, Hannah started to sense that something wasn't right. She kept looking behind her, feeling as if she was being watched. Seeing things in her periphery just out of sight, she began to quicken her pace. She always knew there was something more to her than what everyone else thought, that she was different, not completely of this world but partly in the next, or other world. She could see things, feel things, sense things that others could not. She had the innate ability to question, to seek, to ask of the unknown more than others would dare. She heard the faint sound of music. At first, she thought it might have been the radio of an alarm clock, but there was no such thing in her guest room at the manor. She realized it was the notes of a distant piano. Those distinctive, ethereal, haunting frequencies that she had spent so much of her life unraveling and riding on the wave of. It was coming from downstairs. The music channeled through her, carrying her away from the manor into a different space. She didn't have to think about it. The synergy between her nimble fingers and her intuitive ears was a long-established connection. There was a flow between them that didn't require planning, measuring, or calculating. She knew the notes, and the notes knew her. Hannah spent that afternoon combing the shores of Maple Hollow. Now that she had seen it from above, she was even more curious to see it in person. In some parts of the island, the shore was impassable, filled with cliffs or large craggy rocks strewn about from the wild waves of storms past. In other parts, she could easily walk along the sandy shore unobstructed. She spent the morning perusing the craft booths at the farmer's market, breathing in the wafting smells of cinnamon and cloves that floated in the air, and sampling the scrumptious festival goodies. Children bobbed for apples, chased each other through corn mazes, and played amongst the multitude of harvest games, while their parents picked out costumes for the big event. With a loud gasp, Hannah awoke. She was lying in bed, the covers tucked in around her neck. As she came back to consciousness, the feeling of doom she'd had in the dream followed her. Her stomach growled and knotted as she attempted to sit up. She had passed out. She was sick. Something had happened to her. But what? Hannah had always felt the power of the moon when it was full, but she had never given much thought to the other phases, or what the moon's energy or power might be at other times of the month. She knew there was a connection between her body and the moon, that they did have a cycle that seemed to correspond. She knew it must all tie together. Hannah closed her eyes again and placed her hands upon the pumpkin. She sat in stillness, following her breath. She began to feel a chill, not from the basement, but rather from within herself. Hannah had been drawn to the island. It was, after all, her time to discover her true calling. We all have those moments in life when we hear the call to take a detour, to go down the unknown road of uncertainty. Hannah's attention was drawn behind her. There was a fire crackling in the very large fireplace. She remembered reading that Samhain was an ancient Celtic fire festival. The fire was popping and dancing, but it was something more than fire. The moon made its way across the sky. The silence of the night fell like a thick fog around the island. Nestled in the firefly glows and the lightning bugs, the crickets slowly hummed and the crows cawed in the distance. A breeze gently blew. It was time for them all to go to sleep, to dreamland. Any spirit we've known or not known can come to our aid in the land of dreams. It is a magical place, which most people don't realize. But when we open ourselves up to the guidance the dream world offers, we welcome the assistance the universe wants to give us. Halloween originated from a pagan festival. The Celtic people of old revered this day as their New Year's Eve. It was in fact seen as the ending of the year. It was a time when the seasons shifted. Summer's warmth waned and the harvest came due, after which arrived the inevitable period of darkness and death that is part of the cycle of life. On Samhain, the Celts believed the spirits of those who had passed on from this world would return to walk amongst us.